So I would really love to start by saying that on behalf of Escuela del Sol Montessori, I'm filled with so much pride and so much gratitude to present this first annual Alumni Award to you, Ovie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was so delighted when I when I got the email about this award. I was very emotional to know that I had received it because I I love so Escuela kind of started this journey of like loving to learn and loving to care for the people around me. And I think it did something to my younger self that
Mhm.
was reflected in why I went to Ukraine and why I perform and why I do a lot of the things that I do now. And so I was really happy to see that you guys recognized the love that I poured into my project.
I just think it's really interesting because you really have come to embody the Escuela mission, which is to inspire a love of lifelong learning. And at your very young age, you are obviously doing that in school and out of school with all of the work that you do. I also think that it's important to reflect on Dr. Maria Montessori's mission, which was really education for world peace. So everything in Montessori is designed to promote peace in the world. And that is also something that you, at your young age, is spending time doing. So, first, I'd love for you to share a story about your work in action.
Okay. So my Ukraine project last year, it really started with so I would say I'd always had this an interest, first of all, in world global events, global conflicts, trying to just figure out where we are as a nation, where we are as a people, um, in the world. Um, the war in Ukraine was sort of at the forefront of global news. And I watched it on the news. And I think that um I was in amidst the stress of like my junior year, the end of my junior year. I couldn't help but think of the fact that I am stressed in a place of privilege. And that really bothered me. That my stress was my chemistry exam and my who knows what, this AP exam or whatever. It bothered me that that was my stress and other people were feeling stress about like, you know, their family members, whether they were alive or not, or, whether they would ever be able to go back home. And so I thought, um, what can I do? I did research on sort of um, aid. And so we collected like I think over 300 pounds of aid. It started with distributing the supplies and it sort of ended up being building connections with the people, the refugees themselves. But like the kids, like for me, it was sort of this understanding that these kids deserve an equal opportunity to succeed as I've been given. And, that sort of got the ball rolling with thinking about new projects for mental health counseling, for dental work. Um, and so we're hoping to, get those done as soon as we can actually get back to Ukraine because right now we are not allowed to go. Yeah. So that was sort of in a nutshell what we did.
So the next question I think is hilarious, and that one of my students wanted to know, what was it like having Miss Inga as a teacher?
Okay.
If you can remember that far back. And then I think we should ask too, what was it like having Miss Tunisia as a teacher?
Okay, okay. Let me try to remember. I mean, I remember things for sure. I've taken these lessons with me for the rest of my life. And I've always seen both of you as like, how do I say? It's like you guys are always watching over us as we were, growing. But I think you still are as we're, as we continue growing. And I know that I will always have um, someone to come back to who cares and loves, um, no matter what kind of struggle or what kind of, where I am in my life. So I took, I felt a lot of love from Escuela as a young little girl. Um, but I haven't lost the lessons that you guys have taught me. And the biggest one was, I think, like, actually there's nothing, actually there's something really great about loving what you're learning and loving what you do and being passionate about it. So um yeah, that's what it was like.
I have some questions from the students, the elementary students at Escuela, and I wonder if we could start. They have some Ukraine questions and then also some piano questions. So maybe we'll start with the Ukraine questions since they were most, even though it was interesting, because even though a lot of them can relate to playing the piano because many of them are taking lessons,
Yeah.
they were most interested in your work in Ukraine. They couldn't believe that you were actually in a place that was currently, while you were there, at war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so the very first question that was asked actually was, what emotions did you feel when you were in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I love that kids are asking questions like that. What emotion did you feel? That's good. That's good. Um,
Right
well,
to the point, right?
I love it. Um, so I would say that um, at first I was, well, crossing the border from Romania to Ukraine, which is what we did every morning and every night because we slept on the Romanian side of the border. Um, I think, it was, we would watch people like maybe like I think 10 or 15 families like crowded in a bus trying to cross the border, into Romania, get supplies and come back. And you know, the first thing that I felt was um, you know, besides like a sense of duty to like, help them and make their lives easier, it was heartbreaking. Um, because it was, I mean, it was not fair, right? It was women and children who um, had no idea how the next hour, the next day, the next week was going to go of their lives. Um, and so the first thing I would say is like, there were a lot of like tears and we were in shock. Um, Seeing the kids, you know, sort of pour love into each other and into us, that was sort of my biggest takeaway from the trip. So
The kids would like to know what it looked like in Ukraine and if you could tell that there was a war going
um well, in the city that I was in, Chernivtsi, uh you could not tell that there was an active war going on, as in there was no active conflict in this city. It was the region was sort of where all the refugees had come to on the western side. The eastern side, so from the middle to the east, was where the war was at the time. Now it has spread since to the west, but at the time it was sort of focused on the eastern part, the part that borders Russia. Um, there were bomb shelters in majority of the buildings that we were in, and we were always told to find them before we sat down. So, for example, right behind my dressing room in the venue that I performed at, there was a bomb shelter, and so there were signs for everybody to go there. So there were ways, like it's like an exit sign, except it's not to an exit, it's just to a shelter. So that was something that we experienced. We also heard the missile alarms, missile sirens. Um, it sort of seems like they're coming from the clouds, like they just come out of nowhere. Um, and that was scary because they would sound them anytime there was an incoming missile, and then we would get notifications that it was shot down. So that was like the tiniest taste of what the people in the East and the Ukrainian people in general would have been feeling, like the fear. Um, that was like a very little sort of, you know, maybe 20-minute experience of like the panic, you know? So yeah, we did hear the sirens and we did have bomb shelters, but um there was no active war there. No.
Were you more excited or more nervous when you were in Ukraine?
Um I wouldn't say I was I was either excited or nervous. Um I was happy to be able to go. It was a privilege and I was grateful that I could go. I wouldn't say anything really made me nervous, because at that point it was very hard to think about myself
Yeah.
when I was seeing other people struggling so much. And so, uh, there were some nerves. The border crossing was a little bit scary. They would sort of look through your car, look through your stuff. But then again, it was protocol. And it was important to, I guess, come to another country and respect their protocols and how they were keeping themselves safe. And we were guests, and um, it was important to remember that we were guests, and um, we were received with a lot of love. Um, the Ukrainian people are wonderful. The ones that we met were wonderful. They're so warm, and um, yeah. So I would say that I was happy to make them happy, and I was sad for them. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how I felt.
How many places have you traveled to for piano, and what places were they?
I have traveled around the United States. So I've performed in New York City. I've performed in San Jose, California. I've performed many places in Florida and Georgia because I've lived in those states. Um, in Albuquerque, of course. Um, let's see. Internationally, I've been to London, been to St. Petersburg, Russia. Um, I have been to Ukraine, of course, performed in Ukraine. Um, gosh, I'm not remembering. It's been a long 15 years of doing this. But yeah, no, I've been to some really cool cities, and um, performing is one of my favorite things in the whole world. And being received by people who actually want to hear you play in anywhere in the world is the coolest thing. And that's part of the reason why I keep doing piano, because I love sharing it with people. So I'm hoping to be able to travel more and more.
The last question is, what lessons have you learned from playing piano?
That's a good one. Um, well, uh, I think the first lesson I've learned is that um, discipline um, will take you a lot further than your talent, um, and you know whether or not you actually feel like doing something on a day-to-day basis. Now, sort of in an overarching sense, if you don't feel like doing it at all, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But I'm saying, as in, like, there's some level of um you have to have some level of confidence that you're doing the right thing, but also the discipline to continue doing it on the days you don't feel like it's the right thing. um and I have pushed myself past, you know, more days than I would like to admit that I didn't feel like playing the piano anymore. Um, and so the importance of having a daily routine and being accountability, it's been a big one, because no one really knows how much you practice but yourself. But then when you show your teacher your performance, they're going to know how much you practiced, you know? And so self accountability on a day-to-day basis so that you can show your teacher a good performance.
It's this idea that you don't always have to have instant gratification. You don't always have to feel comfortable. And I like to tell my students and my children that it doesn't matter how smart you are, it's about how hard you work and
Yep,
how you work through things. And
absolutely.
I love how you say that you're not going to enjoy every moment of it. And there are going to be many, many days where you want to give up. But if it, at the heart of it, if you are passionate about it, if it feels like a calling, then you do have to develop a discipline and a practice that can carry you through all those moments that are hard.
Yeah, and I think at this point, of where I am, I've learned to enjoy that struggle.
Mm.
Um, I talk, sometimes I'll be practicing. I practice here a lot, and I'm in the practice rooms majority of the day. I eat in there. I take naps in there. I do a lot of things in there. And so I've learned that, when I feel overwhelmed, to step out, go talk to my peers, ask them what they're playing, take five, chill out, take care of myself for a minute, and then go back. And so the element of self-care, if you add that, it makes it a little bit easier to continue pushing. Um, but also like when it gets uncomfortable, um, I think like I have what's helped me so much is sort of thinking less about how it feels emotionally and more of like, how does it feel here? Am I hearing music or am I hearing myself just play the same thing wrong over and over again? And sometimes it'll just be the same thing wrong over and over again. So I get up, take a breath, drink some water, sit down, and just do it right because I have very little time to get things right. Um, and that's sort of a reflection of how a lot of things are, in as an adult, at least in the career that I want to do, as a doctor, you usually have one chance to get things right. I mean, as a surgeon or as as somebody who works in high risk trauma, which is what I want to do. Um, and so being able to get your mind together and put your best foot forward all the time, it's draining. I know it's draining, but it's, um, I find a lot of gratification on a bigger level, like on a greater level from doing that. And I feel proud of myself and I feel like I'm making my parents proud, but more importantly, I'm making myself proud in doing what I want to do. Because never ever do I feel like I should be doing something different than working really, really hard at what I love, um, which I think is cool because, you know, there's, I would rather feel the struggle of like, you know, being on hour 8 of rehearsal, playing an instrument that I actually love playing, than doing something that I really don't want to do and struggling with that mentally and being, in a state of confusion. Um, so yeah, that's kind of that's where I am.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that you have found so much passion and love in life. And we wish you the best, Ovie.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.